So just to kick us off, we're going to introduce ourselves. Hi, my name is Karen. I am the head of social media here at 2 Octobers. I have about 8 years of experience in social advertising, and I like to say I've touched just about every vertical that you can think of. Everything from high-end furniture to small credit unions, you name a vertical, I've probably worked in it at some point. I am also the proud human of a very anxious 8-year-old Boston Terrier mix named Hank, who is true to his description here as having a lot of feelings this morning. So he may make an appearance at any time. And Randy, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Randy McFadden. I'm an SEO senior manager here at 2 Octobers. I've been in SEO for a little over 7 years and in digital marketing in general since college. And when I'm not working, fighting with Google or working on ADA stuff, I'm probably watching horror movies at home.
Yeah, it definitely is the season for that right now. I know my horror movie intake has shot up in the past couple days.
Oh, yeah.
So just a little bit about us. If you are new to our workshops, we are a B Corp, which means we're committed to balancing profit and purpose. We strive to make organizations better and partner with all of our clients to make informed business decisions to help grow their brands. So one thing, so just setting the stage here, we are not experts. So these are, topics and things that we've seen as we've been working with our clients and just kind of generally working in marketing as a whole, and just striving to be better, be more inclusive. So the really takeaway umbrella theme here is to just be better than the baseline. Strive to be better, strive for improvement. These are just things that we're learning and sharing with you guys. So just, framing today for you. So a quick outline of what we're going to be going through here. So just a quick touch base on understanding bias in marketing. We're going to talk about inclusivity, accessibility, and then we have some audits that we're going to demo and run through for you all. So we're going to talk about a lot of theories and concepts in 2 and 3, and then how to analyze those theories and concepts in section 4. So diving right in, understanding bias in marketing. So cultural bias can impact marketing in a lot of ways. And this happens when you maybe do some ad targeting, create your website, and you don't think outside of your culture and your cultural norms. So just not thinking outside of yourself. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means maybe you need to take a step back and look at some things. And the risks of not taking that step back, you could have just a general miscommunication with your audience. If it's an ad campaign, you could have poor ad performance. And if it's something really bad, you could damage your brand, possibly permanently. So how to combat that is diving into inclusivity. So people want to see themselves reflected in the advertising they're seeing, in the websites that they're visiting. People, representation matters. And there's a variety of ways that you can have that representation. So being better, step 1 here is doing your research, paying attention to the language that you're using, choosing images carefully, and in that avoiding woke washing, which we will touch on, and your ad targeting. Who are you going after? Here, there's going to be a lot of screenshots and a lot of examples throughout here. And this is just a screenshot of an ad. As you can see, we've got some inclusivity here with different body type representation. So here's an example of a to-do in this case. So in doing your research, look at who your audience is, who your true audience is. How can we integrate personas into this? Personas is a hot button topic when it comes to inclusivity because they are of themselves exclusive. So if you are really wanting to create personas for these different audiences that you're reaching, it is important that those personas are based in research and not just imagination and assumption. Having data to back things up can help combat some of those biases and build, that true audience, who your audience really is, building that into your campaigns and into, the visual representation of your brand to make sure that, as I said before, people are seeing themselves in your branding. Pay attention to language. Keep it simple. You don't want a phrase that I've seen in some of my research and travels around this topic is language elitism. So keep your language clear, plain, simple, simple sentences, right around a 4th to 6th grade reading level. Also, if you're using any slang or different phrases, just be aware that sometimes that slang and those phrases could mean something else in different cultures. So just making sure you're not using something incorrectly there, and avoiding culturally appropriative words, like guru out of out of context, powwow out of context. So just for an example, having a headline for an ad that says, speak to one of our gurus today. Unless you run an ashram, maybe don't use that word. Use words like experts, or schedule a powwow with one of our sales associates. No, schedule a meeting. So just making sure that you're avoiding some of these words in your marketing because you're using them incorrectly. And choosing your images. So like I've touched on before, who's representing your brand? You can look at things like race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, body type, abilities, age. I understand as somebody who builds visual ads, uses images every day, all day, that sometimes you've got to use a stock photo that maybe isn't the best. I feel like every marketer has had the situation where you're, really scrounging to find a decent stock photo. Here's an example that I found of using a stock photo and making it your own. And I know this is a stock photo because I've used this image myself. So by taking, you can take a kind of generic stock photo and add, a spin to it that makes it feel more authentic and not so much of like a stock image. Also, another brand that does this really well is Aerie. They've built their brand on being inclusive, and a lot of people can't afford to do photo shoots with all sorts of different models. A lot of people have to rely on stock photos. So finding really honing in on something that feels more authentic. And less performative, less, just it feels like it's trying to, tick the proverbial boxes. And yes, if you look in the middle of our image to the right here, that is John Boyega of Star Wars fame. I always like to pull this image in when talking about this. So on the note of authenticity and performative imagery, you want to avoid woke washing, which, kind of similar to greenwashing, there's various types of washing happening these days. Woke washing is when a company kind of signals that they are an activist in some way, but really they're just trying to make money. A good example of this is, during Pride Month, a lot of brands will just slap a rainbow on their website and call it a day, just trying to, take advantage of the Pride Month and the community. Another egregious example of this that has really shown what not to do, even parodied on SNL, was the infamous Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad, where she ended a riot by giving a police officer a Pepsi. That's an oversimplification of an issue. And as everyone is aware, tremendous amount of backlash for that. So that's an example of, how it can damage your brand, maybe permanently. And then, who are you targeting with your advertising? Who are you including? Who are you excluding? Are you playing into some, racist and classist systems inadvertently? You can accidentally be doing this with income targeting and, zip code targeting. Zip code targeting, makes sense if you say have a brick and mortar business. That makes sense. But if you're an e-com business doing zip code targeting, you could be playing into, some system, the systems around income inequality and redlining, things like that. So just taking a step back and really looking at who you're targeting. So of everything I just said, why does it matter besides just being nice and getting a warm feeling when you're creating your ads? People really do care about this. So from an article from Google, they found that 64% of shoppers will take action on an ad after seeing an inclusive ad. They're more likely to, take action on that ad. And this next generation of buyers coming up, they're really changing the e-com, the shopping game. They, generally speaking, they grew up with more diversity by having access to the internet from birth. They, more so, they hold more progressive values and place a higher importance on a brand's values than past generations do. They're more likely to go for a brand that they feel has an inclusive representation than one that doesn't. And they are coming up with a lot of buying power, and it's just going to keep growing and growing. All right, now over to Randy to chat about accessibility.
Thank you, Karen. So what is accessibility and how does it relate to digital content? ADA refers to the Americans with Disabilities Act, Standards for Accessible Design. So it's taken a concept that we utilize in a public space like buildings and general public areas where we want all of those entryways, sidewalks, et cetera, to be accessible to everyone. We want that same thing applied to websites and digital marketing in general. So a standard has been created to try to measure how accessible websites are and what can you do to make them even more accessible. So why are we here? Why are we talking about ADA compliance? Why is it important? Like Karen mentioned, when talking about inclusivity in marketing, we want the same thing when it comes to access to your digital content. Approximately over 7 million people in the United States rely on things like screen readers to actually view digital content. So a perfectly accessible site will be able to have screen readers perfectly navigate to all users, every page, every landing page, every image, every text, every piece of digital content. Now, we're not all going to get 100% on accessibility, but what we want to do is try to reach these 7+ million people to make sure that they're not missing out on things that they should have access to. There are things like color contrast ratios that need to be stark enough so people can read it, font sizes, making sure people understand what images are on the landing page, videos, etc. There are so many nuanced things that a lot of us can naturally see, but we want to make sure that everyone can view it. Beyond that, avoiding lawsuits is always a good thing. There was approximately 3,500 lawsuits in 2020 regarding non-compliant websites. Even entities like Domino's and Beyonce have been sued because their websites did not reach ADA compliance. So even Beyonce is not immune to having a compliant website. And even beyond that, if those two things aren't enough, improving your site performance, it inherently improves user experience. It's looking at things like if you have header tags in place, if your content is structured in a way that's easily read by a screen reader, can people actually see the visuals if the text blends in with the background, and that's a sign that it's not too compliant. It allows for things like improved rankings because those headers are in a good place, the URL structures are in a good place. Improved image results because you have alt tags that are speaking succinctly to what the images are. And people can actually access your service and products. I'm sure all of us here, we all have a website we've touched where we want to make sure that is actually accessible to not only our target audience, but all the sub-targets we don't always think about. Everyone who may need assistance with navigating a website, we just want them to be able to access it so they can see all the great things that you're providing as a service and product. So the big question here is, how do you make your site ADA compliant? And that's a great question. And like Karen said earlier, we're not experts on this yet, but we're growing expertise by learning more about it. So let's say you're building a website right now. There are guidelines by the ADA, actually I have it right here, the accessibility guidelines on WCAG, which actually gives you information on what to look at when you're trying to build a compliant website. So really follow the guidelines that are already listed for us. You want to make sure typical dev things are in place. That could lead to inherently accessible website, but make sure you have alt tags, headers, color contrast that reaches users with different visual impairments. There are guidelines out there that we can follow. And let's say you already have a website or you built one, you want to double check your work. I use tools like PowerMapper, and PowerMapper is actually one I'm going to use for the audit that we're going to show later. But there are some other tools like Inclusivity, which allows you to kind of automate the ADA compliance of your website. WebAIM, EqualWeb, AudioEye, these are all great tools and guidelines that actually walks you through what nuanced things your websites are missing that would make them compliant if you have them in place. So these tools are for everyone who has a website. Everyone who touches digital content should be looking at guidelines and researching these kind of tools to see how we can make sure that our content is actually accessible. And of course, if this gets way too technical with some of these tools, ask an agency like 2 Octobers. We can help you walk you through this process because this is something we're focusing on too as an agency. How can we incorporate ADA assessments, audits, and dev builds into what we recommend for all of our clients? So people like us will work with you to try to see how can we make the website a little bit more compliant so that everyone can have a fair chance at seeing all the services and products that you guys offer.
All right, thanks, Randy. So diving into the audit, so for the inclusivity portion, unlike Randy, this doesn't, there aren't tools that can help you with this. So we built our own tool. And if, oh, and also if you know, I couldn't find a tool, but if you know of a tool, please let me know. But we built our own and broke it down into different sections. And I'm just gonna run you through those sections now. So looking at your creative, does your creative use a range of representation? Does it play into any stereotypes or cliches? Is it pandering, you know, like I mentioned before, slapping a rainbow on your company logo in June? And here's an ad that I found really interesting. So, you know, it's just a screenshot, so I can't flip through all the different images, but, you know, this company is selling tights, and all of their models were all, you know, very thin and at least white passing. So out of, you know, looking at their ad, I think, oh, you know, they're not super size inclusive. They probably have a limited range. I clicked to their site and they actually had a large range of sizes and different body representation on their site. So this is, you know, just an example of, you know, making sure that your ad representation, you know, this is the first time I've ever seen an ad from these people. You know, my first impression is, oh, they're not very inclusive, but really you are. So you want to make sure that, you know, your visual is matching what your actual, you know, brand is. So the content and the copy. Is the language problematic? Are you using he, she pronouns when you can use a more gender neutral option, like it's like the singular they, them? Is there diversity? Is there any ableist language in your copy? And here, this is a real ad. It's from a few years ago, but it's still, boy, is it bad. So here's an ad from Mr. Clean, you know, this Mother's Day, get back to the job that really matters. This is a big yikes. This is a failing grade. So, you know, really just taking a step and really thinking about the words that you're using in your advertising. And then with your targeting, you know, like I mentioned before, if you say, you know, you have a, you know, high-end brand, you think, okay, I'm going to target people who have higher household incomes. So here's a map of the Denver metro area, and you can see that if you were to target people in the Denver metro area with high median household incomes, you're excluding a lot of people of color. So really,
mediation, one thing that some people don't often realize, that if you are feeling brave enough to do it, you feel that.
I'm sorry, you broke up a bit. I couldn't quite hear that.
I think we're good. I think you can keep going. If there are any questions, feel free to put them through chat, and then we will have time at the end to go through questions, but I think that was just a muting issue.
Okay, just checking. But, you know, really, the audits are all about giving yourself that, you know, 10,000 foot view of, and making sure, you know, your assumptions might not be damaging. You know, when it comes to, you know, like I have here, the like seemingly innocuous income targeting. And then on site, do you have forms on your site? Are, you know, are they gender neutral? What data are you collecting? So this is for a fun change of pace, this is an example of a good form. You know, in my many years on the internet, I've seen forms that ask you to select an honorific. So Mr., Ms., you know, that's not inclusive for, you know, people who are, you know, non-binary, for example. If you're collecting birthdays, are you pulling in ages? That could be, you know, pulling in the years of the birthday. That could, you know, be, you know, signaling to some people that maybe there's going to be some ageism there. So just really looking at the data you're collecting and is it all necessary?
Cool. So the good thing about ADA compliance is, like I said earlier, there are a lot of tools that can assist us with trying to figure out, is my website accessible? It is not an inherently obvious thing that a website is accessible. I've worked on hundreds of websites, and while I'm able to navigate them cleanly, just looking at websites, it's hard to tell all the nuanced things that might make a website less accessible to the next person. So what we're looking at is a WCAG standard of levels of compliancy. So hitting level A means that you are baseline compliant. If you're missing this first level, that means it's the almost equivalent of someone not being able to access a building, getting inside the building itself. That's how inaccessible some of the landing pages might be perceived to people who might need visual aid tools or things like screen readers. So that when we're looking at priorities, making sure that your website is at least level A compliant would be the first step into making sure people can enter and navigate your landing page with less issues than before. The next level is defined as double A. That is the next priority you want to aim for. In general, when we're working on cleaning up ADA compliance issues, we'll try to aim for double A. That's at least the median of this cleans up a lot of the issues, so that things like color contrast or alt tags or being able to just read a landing page from beginning to end is not only understandable, but it's at least in a way that's comfortable for a user to navigate. And then the next level is defined as AAA. So this is as compliant as we can measurably get so far. This is, you can read it cleanly. There's no text that's too small that blends in with the background. Every image is defined as what it is succinctly. Every video is, all the URLs are clean. It's a really well-developed website that's accessible to most people, at least in the ways that we can define using metrics. So what are the issues that are in each of these levels? So on the next slide, we'll go through and show some examples of an actual audit and what some of the level A, double A, and AAA issues that we saw. So the first couple here refer to alt text. So the first one says alt text should not be an image file name, and the next one was alt text should not contain placeholders like picture or spacer. So I will say, anytime we do look at ADA assessments for websites, alt tags are probably the #1 things I see that are an immediate issue that people are missing. So an alt text describes what the image is. It should be a succinct descriptor that simply describes what the image is, and it's in the most simple terms. And what happens a lot of times when we're writing blogs, making landing pages, we'll see an image, we'll upload it, and you might leave it at that. But what you want to make sure is that alt text is there. It's describing that image. It's not something that should be overly stuffed with keywords like certified used Subaru in Burlington, Vermont. It should just say, hey, this is a blue car. That would work. Blue car could simply work as an alt text. It shouldn't be the same as a file name. When a screen reader is reading through a web page, they're going to read the URLs as well. So if the file name is the same as the alt text, it can almost sound like a stutter. So you do want it to make it a little bit different, but again, descriptive and succinct. And when I talked earlier about how can this improve your website performance, well, alt text, as some of you may know, is a way that Google reads images. So if you have alt text in place, not only does it improve your basic level A level of compliance for ADA standards, but it can improve your image search results as well at the same time. That's a perfect example of SEO meets ADA in a very succinct way. It's easy to implement. And again, one of the easiest things you could do when you're uploading an image, check the alt text, make sure it's in place. Another common one, a few lines down on here, labels it as link uses general text like click here with no surrounding text explaining the link purpose. That's another really common one when we see those anchor texts that says click here or read more or learn more. It's really common and we don't really think much about it. A lot of us can see the image or read the text before, understand contextually, clicking here is leading to more information about that. But in cases where maybe the image is hard to fully understand, or maybe the text doesn't really summarize what that link might say, we want the link there not to say click here. We want it to, again, much like alt text, succinctly describe what that action means. So if you want them to see a gallery of dog collars for sale, that link, instead of saying click here, could say view our dog collars. That alone already makes it more descriptive. And when screen readers are reading that anchor text, the text within the internal link, they're describing to the user what that link is about. And that's, again, that's one of the more common ones we see as well. We think not much of it. A lot of us have blogs featured on our homepage that just says read more, learn more, click here. Describe what it is in simple terms, and already you're meeting basic levels for ADA compliance. And we can go to the next slide to show a few more examples. So researching bad examples of non-compliant or good examples of non-compliant websites was interesting. A lot of them were old school websites. So no one's building a website like this, even just from dev standards, but things that make it non-compliant. Well, let's start with the background image. It's an entire restaurant. It doesn't have an alt text, and it's the entire background. There's no way that someone who might need something like a screen reader can actually gain the context of what this page is about. And for those who have some sort of visual impairments, the text, really hard to see. It's hard for me to read it. And it blends in with the text. It blends in with the background that it's a part of. The buttons next to it, hard to read, kind of image-based. It's not too descriptive of what it's talking about. This is as bad as it can kind of get for a site maybe built even 20 years ago. Again, that's an extreme version of it doesn't hit level A compliance at all. But of course, I'm going to have more modern examples that show, okay, maybe some level A compliancy is adhered to, but it could still be better. And it's a site that a lot of us can probably have experience in even building ourselves. So let's move on to level AA compliancy. Again, AA, better than A. It means that people can technically navigate your website, but there are still a lot of different ways that you can improve it. Another very common AA issue is basic contrast between text and background colors. We've all seen it where you might have text that's kind of hard to read because the background image is pretty close to the text color. People with certain visual impairments inherently find it hard to read the text. So they might have to use something like a screen reader in order to read text that they otherwise could have read themselves if there was enough contrast. And there are tools like WebAIM and other color contrast plugins that you could research and utilize to figure out if your branding colors do provide enough contrast. But that is one of the most common ones that, if fixed, you can reach more level AA compliancy. And on this next slide is an example of that. So this is an architecture firm. They have basic navigations, landing pages, services. It mostly looks like a fairly modern 2010s website. But one thing that is obvious is the subtext under that header, real architecture. It's hard to read. It's blending in with those nice stairs in the background. It's hard to read that it says planning and development, architecture, interior design, etc. What we want is for that to starkly contrast what it shows in the background. That way, it's easy to read what it is. Sometimes ADA compliancy is that simple. Can you even read it clearly? Is the text large enough? Is it just blending in with the background? Keeping that in mind and utilizing tools that actually measure the contrast ratio, like WebAIM, like Power Mapper, that can help you when you're trying to figure out, is this enough contrast? It's enough contrast for me. The most stark contrast is this black side menu with the white text. That's very contrast. The red, less so, but again, utilizing basic eye tests, basic web tools that can help you technically measure this. These will all help you understand if how you built the website is living up to even this AA standard. And AAA. So again, reaching AAA compliancy, you're doing a great job. If you have A and AA already knocked out, which is hard to do for everyone, then AAA is where you can move next. Take it to the next level and make sure that people can navigate it from every angle. So there are a lot of different examples here. Some that get brought up again. General text like click here is used. There's a note here that says ensure that text and background colors have a 7:1 contrast ratio. Again, that's the next level of maybe it was technically contrasted before in the AA standards, but if you can make it almost as close as black background on white text, then that would make it even more visually accessible to people who need it. But one I wanted to share was the several links on a page share the same link text, but go to different destinations. That's a more simple example out of this list. And another one I see commonly, even when not doing an ADA assessment. So again, several links on a page share the same link text, but go to different destinations. So essentially, you might have a landing page that's promoting different kind of product categories or different blogs. And all the text says things like, click here, or dog collars for sale, dog collars for sale, dog collars for sale. If these links go to unique areas of your website, make sure that they say unique things. They shouldn't be just a one text example of, yeah, they'll get the gist of it. It's about dog collars. If the category is, harnesses versus no pull harnesses versus different color of harnesses, describe that in the text that you link. Make sure that it's unique enough so that when a screen reader is reading through these different anchor texts, that is giving the user context about what they're going to click through next. Again, it's similar advice with the click here versus describing what the link is. Make sure that the anchor links are diverse. Otherwise, it's less useful for a screen reader to try their best to describe what they can expect. And on the next slide is a site that did pretty well when running through some basic ADA assessments. This is Scope. They actually deal with trying to make the world a more accessible place, ironically. And it makes sense because a lot of what I've seen here, their images have alt tags. Their call to actions are described. They're not just click here. They say things like more about invisible impairments. They have enough contrast with text and background for the most part to at least be level AA compliant. A lot of their URLs are clean and easy to read. Again, their text, a lot of it is on well contrasted backgrounds. And this is an example of, okay, they did their due diligence. It looks like they hit a lot of the double level A compliances, and they're making an effort. I guarantee if I did a full audit of their website, they're not 100%. They're not going to hit all AAA standards because it's hard to do that. We're all just trying our best to make our websites accessible for others, or at least we're learning to do that. And that's something even us at 2 Octobers are trying to get better at, is incorporating this in some of the inherent services we offer. When we're working on our own website, how much more compliant can we make it? There's always room for improvement. And really, even if your legal team wants to hear more about the lawsuits, showing an effort is a great defense at that. You're trying your best at making it more compliant. And we're going to utilize tools like Power Mapper or Accessibility or the WCAG guidelines to help us make our websites a little bit more accessible.
Hey, Randy, we got a question that I feel like is relevant to this page. So question is, when linking anchor text to another internal page, is it best practice to select open in new window?
So I think where the page opens up after you click on it, I think in general, it's simpler to leave it as a URL that reloads on that same landing page instead of opening a new window. It's easier to navigate inherently if it just stays in that same tab. So if you're referring to something like clicking on a link and it pops up in literally a different window, I'm not sure for sure if that's the best practice from a compliancy standpoint, but I do think it makes more sense if you can contain it in the same window that your screen reader is probably operating in. Great question. That's something that maybe either way, it's as long as where they're landing is compliant, then it matters less about where it opened up. But was the anchor text descriptive? Did it lead to another page that was also fairly compliant? I think those are at least the basic ideas we want to keep in mind, regardless of where it might open up next. But great question.
Thanks, Randy. And like Randy said, like we said at the beginning, we're striving to be better. So progress, not perfection. All of this can be very overwhelming when you're like starting to learn about it and take it on and try to incorporate these things. So just take away, be better than the baseline. Try a little harder. We're all in this together and we're all trying our best here. So yeah, just keep going, just keep trying.